to be here today. Thank you everyone for having me. Today I want to give you a very brief introduction to ReasonML. Before I get started, I want to say I am on Twitter and I'd love to hear from everyone. So if you're tweeting about the conference, then please do say hello. If anyone has any questions at the end of my talk, my slot for office hours is at 3:30, so you can find me there. So some of you might have heard of Reason before. There's been a lot of excitement from various prominent developers in the JavaScript community. And this got me interested. So at the start of this year, I decided to find out for myself, what's the big deal? And why is everyone so excited about this new syntax? So today I'll be sharing the origins of Reason and where it comes from, the type system and why I think that's beneficial, and the JS interop thanks to BuckleScript. So Reason isn't really a new programming language, it's a new syntax for OCaml. And OCaml is a functional programming language which originated in the 90s and was very popular in academia. Nowadays, it's commonly used by banks and financial institutions where code correctness is a key priority. But its syntax is often seen as a bit of a hurdle when onboarding new developers, and Facebook saw an opportunity here. In fact, Jordan Warg, one of the core developers behind the React project, came up with this idea, and he wanted to bring OCaml to a whole new audience by making the syntax more familiar for JavaScript developers. And the idea was that this would bring OCaml to a whole new audience, not just JavaScript developers, but developers who have struggled to get used to the syntax of OCaml. And they've spent a lot of time refining this idea, and particularly on improving the developer experience. And we've now reached a point where we've got a language that has all the benefits of OCaml and the decades of engineering that's gone into that, but with a familiar syntax and interop with JavaScript. So when you get started with Reason, one of the key concepts you'll find is the type system. Now, the instinctive response from a lot of developers will be, why can't I use TypeScript or Flow? And that's a perfectly valid reaction. TypeScript and Flow are really useful tools when they're used effectively. But with Reason, types are really baked into the language, and this gives us some very powerful features at the language level. The first one of these is that everything has a type. In Reason, there's 100% type coverage by design. And this means you'll never get that sinking feeling when you dive into some code and you find a half-baked attempt at introducing types. You no longer have to worry about this. Everything has a type in Reason. And the type system is also guaranteed to be completely sound. Now, this means that if your code compiles, types are guaranteed to be correct at runtime. This means you'll never have a type error at runtime. And this eliminates a huge category of bugs from typical JavaScript development. It's a really useful feature. The third feature of the type system I want to explain is pattern matching. And I'm going to explain this with a quick example. So I'm sure many of you have written switch statements in the past, and if you're anything like me, you might have missed an edge case once or twice. And Reason comes with protection against this built in, and we call this pattern matching. And this is an exhaustiveness check, which prevents you from forgetting those edge cases. It's like having a pairing buddy right there with you, picking up on your mistakes. So in this very simplified example, I've been writing some software to calculate the group tables for the World Cup. Of course, I'm in a bit of a rush because the deadline was last week, the group tables are nearly finished, so it's all a bit last minute. But here I've declared a result type, and this is a variant which you can think of as an enum. And this can be a win, a draw, or a loss. My getPoints method takes a parameter r, which is brilliantly named, but it's inferred that r is a result based on the fact that I've already handled cases for a win and a loss. Of course, I've forgotten the case of a draw. So fortunately, Reason provides really useful error messages while you're developing. So here you can see it says this pattern matching is non-exhaustive, and it gives you an example of a type you've missed. So you'll never forget the edge cases. Obviously, this is a very simplified example, but hopefully you can see that this becomes a very powerful feature with more complex examples, particularly when we use this with more complex data structures. It's not just limited to variants or enums. So JavaScript interop. JavaScript interop comes thanks to BuckleScript, which is the build system which is responsible for compiling our Reason code to JavaScript. Without wanting to dive into the performance aspect of BuckleScript, I want to assure you that it's very impressive. It's seriously fast. I won't labour the point, but if you're interested, I encourage you to go away and have a look at some of the benchmarks, because it's really impressive. So BuckleScript generates JavaScript from your Reason code. But it doesn't just generate uglified, minified JavaScript. BuckleScript outputs readable JavaScript that could have been written by any member of your team. Now, this is a really valuable point if you have an existing JavaScript codebase, because you don't want to spend that time up front converting your whole codebase to Reason. You can simply start by writing one file, one module in Reason, and simply dropping in that JavaScript to your existing codebase. And this is the approach taken by the Facebook Messenger team. So 1 or 2 years ago, they began converting their codebase to Reason, and now they have over 50% of the Messenger.com codebase written in Reason, and this is in production. It's also worth mentioning that Reason has very good bindings to React.js. Reason React comes with things like routing, state management, all built in. So it all comes without having to sort of install any additional packages. BuckleScript also lets you access native JavaScript functions within your Reason code. And this is really good if you're just getting started and you're not quite familiar with the APIs yet. You don't have to spend a lot of time up front learning all these APIs. You can simply use your existing JavaScript knowledge within the Reason code. And this really reduces the learning curve when you're just getting started. My favorite feature about BuckleScript isn't actually to do with JavaScript at all. Because if you're writing back-end code, BuckleScript can compile to native. And this means we can run our Reason code just about anywhere. And this is a really useful feature because you don't have to spend time rewriting functionality just so it can work on different platforms. And Jared Forsyth did this. He wrote a game called Gravitron. And with a single Reason codebase, he managed to deploy this app to the iOS App Store, the Google Play Store, and to web. And this is all the single codebase. He didn't have to rewrite any functionality or make any changes for it to work on different platforms. So this is really exciting, single codebase for all these different platforms. Now, this is only a lightning talk, so I didn't get a chance to explain all the functionality of Reason, but hopefully I've got across just a few of the points to why I think it's really useful. Facebook created Reason with JavaScript developers in mind, but it's not just limited to JavaScript development. It aims to make the syntax of OCaml a lot more familiar for all sorts of developers. Now, I've included a few links here that I think you should take a look at if you're interested in Reason. I will tweet these out after the conference, so you can find them on my Twitter. One thing I would encourage you to do is just get started. If you're interested in Reason, just play around, hack about. Enjoy the feeling of learning something new, because you don't often get that opportunity. And before I finish, I just had 2 things I wanted to say. First of all, I wanted to say a big thank you to the conference organisers, because they've put a huge amount of effort behind the scenes, and particularly being a first-time speaker, this has made the experience a whole lot less stressful. So thank you to the organisers. I saw this tweet a few weeks ago, and I couldn't help but share it. Now, Robbie Nevils is a Facebook developer, and he managed to achieve 3D printing with Reason. He shared this code on GitHub, so you can go and take a look, and I think you'll be really surprised at quite how simple it was to achieve this. So on that note, if you're interested in Reason, get stuck in, have fun, and let your imaginations run wild. Thank you.